Cool. Hey everybody. Uh, Today we are going to talk some more about building out some RESTful API stuff with Flask. Um, and we're going to talk both about so the way we did it yesterday with the decorators yeah uh, for the gets and whatnot. Um, we're also going to take a look at another module that's available in Flask. But it's another way of making RESTful APIs. Um, Python is more than one way to do it. Uh, this is more of a class-based way to do it, as opposed to writing individual functions for each route. Um, Neither one is necessarily better than the others, just because of the way that nerds write things. You'll often see stuff like Flask RESTful makes it super easy. I think it is exactly as easy. Um, Maybe a little bit more difficult in some places, maybe a little bit easier in other places. But ultimately it comes down to a matter of personal preference, I think. And the good part is the stuff that we will be our learning objectives for this phase don't really require one or the other. So if you decide Flask RESTful is not for you and you just want to do routes with decorators, totally fine. If you think decorators suck and you want to only use Flask RESTful, totally fine. There will be some places where you will need to do decorators for login prompts and stuff. So that's that. So we'll be mostly looking at the RESTful stuff today, I think. We'll be looking at Flask RESTful today, but it will be RESTful either way. I'll talk a little bit about some stuff at the top there. The other thing I kind of got curious about, uh, so the what we want to learn this phase is how to use the stuff we've learned so far to build a full stack application using SQL Alchemy, Flask, React, all the stuff. Um, and I think there is just because I got some feedback from the from the forums from last week. Um, agree with pretty much all of it. I think there are some things in Canvas in there that are interesting, not necessarily required for our goals. And I don't want to necessarily make a list of all the things that you don't need to know. Uh, but if something's marked optional, of course. But if something feels like it is not aiming towards our goals, and it's just like another cool Python thing that they decided to put in, um, go through it, but don't sweat it, I think is the message I want to give. So to that end, looking at the code challenge stuff for next week. I'm looking at it right now and I can tell you pretty much exactly what we're going to be looking for. Again, we have different ones, so but it's not going to be basically the same kind of thing. We're going to be using SQL Alchemy and Python to build that sort of triangle model shape with two resources that are connected through a third resource. So like a band and a venue and gig, something like that. And so you'll be doing basically what we did yesterday, building out models and relationships with those. There'll be some validations on those. So, like a band name has to be between 5 and 20 characters. So you two can't perform, whatever. And then there will be a React front end already built out for you that will be consuming the API that you're going to build. So that means you're going to be building, um, you get resources that give a bunch of things or a single thing by ID. You'll be doing deletes, posts. I don't think there's any patches. There may be, I might be lying. Um, but that's pretty much it. I think the trickiest part, and we're going to talk about it probably Thursday or Friday, is the serializer stuff. Kind of, but we'll go over some of that today too. But basically, that's just including other resources when you ask for a resource. So if I get like today, will be if get the production and the information for that. We're also going to want to get the cast list along with that information, so we don't do a separate call for it. But that's pretty much exactly what's going to be on the code challenge. So, and it doesn't care which way you implement it. So if you do it with decorators, or you do it with Flask RESTful, or you find a different way you want to do it, totally fine, as long as the API. And that's the cool thing about an API, right? And this kind of leads into what we're going to be talking about today. Building an API means that the important part is the definition of the agreement that we're making. If you request this, you're going to get this back. And so it doesn't matter how you implement that. Could be Flask, could be Flask RESTful, could be Ruby, could be .NET, could be whatever. And again, on the client side, it could be a web browser, it could be a phone app, it could be another server making requests, it could be someone fucking around on the command line. As long as we are interacting with that agreement we've made, that API, the details on the other side don't really matter. So we're going to be talking about implementing the server side of that today. And importantly, I think, maybe not importantly, interestingly, since an API is and a protocol is just an agreement, the medium also is weirdly unimportant. Pretty much 100% of the time, it's going to be a web server on a computer. But technically, it just says send a message that looks like this. And when you do, when you get a message like that, respond in this way. That could be a web server. That could be people exchanging postcards. That could be Morse code. Like, it literally doesn't matter what the medium is. And the same with RESTful, which is just a convention on top of that. If you want to build an API using smoke signals or whatever, that is valid. It's going to be a lot slower, but the important conceptual thing is that APIs, and specifically RESTful APIs, are just a way of constraining or describing our interactions. It's prescriptive, I guess. Yeah. So before we get into code stuff, actually, I want to kind of back up and see where you all are at. So I'm not just talking through something that isn't useful for you. I think I want to hear a little bit from each of you where you're at in the labs and exercises, and what kind of stuff is clicking and what kind of stuff is difficult for you so far. I think I actually want to go do a quick go around and see where we're at. So, Jason, why don't you start us off and we'll just popcorn around. Let's get hands up. And if you haven't done anything and you are confused, totally valid answer.
I have a little bit of a better idea today about where I'm standing with it, but I am still in the I'm on the last lab of the intro section myself. I was taking it a little slowly because I didn't have a ton of time to study SQL alchemy until during the project last week. So some of it's kind of taking me a little bit extra time to
Are there any parts that aren't making sense at all, or
No, it's mostly making sense. Like I said earlier in stand up, it's mostly just the little granular single lines of text that you need to type into either the terminal or the somewhere in your code. I think I'm spending too much time trying to make sure I keep track of all of those. But aside from that, it's pretty firm because I've watched, two different lectures on that yesterday. So,
cool.
Yeah, it's clicking. I'm just moving along kind of at a sloth's pace a little bit.
Sweet.
So, I guess I'll pass it to Miles. Next one on my list.
Um, yeah, thank God you said not being anywhere is a valid answer. I've mostly been focused on just keeping sane. I've got a lot going on in my personal life right now, so just taking care of that over this. I did try my hardest to keep up with yesterday's lecture, but I missed everything to do with app, like app.py. So there was a pretty substantial roadblock to getting anything to work.
That's why we record it. So yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Who's up next?
Let's pass it over to let's go with Gabby.
I've been working on the building APIs section. So far, I've just been doing like the Get API lab, and I feel like that's all making sense. I feel like it's not too different from the other like Get stuff that we've done. It's just kind of like a little bit of a different format. Um, yeah, other than that, so far it's been going pretty smooth, suspiciously smooth. So yeah, I'll pass it to Colin.
I just did the post patch delete, kind of the guided lesson one. I was about to start the lab, but I hadn't yet. I think it's going fine. It's a lot to remember at once, so I don't think if I went to the lab and tried to do it all at once, like without referring to the previous lesson, I doubt I'd be able to do it. But
Same.
I think that just comes with comes with it. Like I guess I can't expect myself to remember everything at once, but
Cool. Who's up
yeah,
next?
it's Yosaki.
Like Gabby said, the building API part was pretty straightforward. It was making sense. I was working on the delete, patch delete and post today, and for some reason I had a hard time setting up for post and patch.
Hmm.
Post, yeah, post patch. I was okay with get and delete, but with post and patch it was kind of fuzzy. So yeah,
Um,
I'll
Two questions, I guess. Remind me, is that the one that uses the decorator,
post.
or is that using the Flask RESTful one?
Yeah, with the decorator.
Awesome, cool. And second question, I guess, is there anything in particular about the patch stuff that is tripping up, either conceptually or or
Yeah, so I was putting in the like informations, like it was for like game and review, and I was putting in like information like scores and comments for the review, but when I like hit send in Postman, it was coming back as object, but
Hmm.
like all the attributes had null instead of the yeah stuff that I put in. So and then when I tried to update, it didn't really work either. So yeah, I think it's to do with like setting up in the app.py, but not sure. And I nothing worked. So I like there was a solution code at the end of the code along like lesson. I copy and pasted the solution code, but it didn't work either. So
Believe that, yeah.
I couldn't figure it out.
Cool. Who's up next?
Eric?
All right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm still in the intro, the Flask section. I haven't really got to the SQL alchemy stuff, but that's more of a factor of me basically getting nothing done yesterday. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not expecting to have much of a problem with it when I get to it.
Mhm.
Just haven't gotten there yet.
Cool. Who's up?
I'll go Gale.
So I've just been looking at the Get API stuff a little bit, so a little bit past the intro. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I also looked at the post and patch one. I also agree with Colin that it's just like a lot to remember, and I don't want to put pressure on myself to try to remember it. Yeah. But yeah, I always do that, so trying to not do that. But but yeah, I don't think any problems, just still getting used to just remembering what to, or just kind of figuring out this syntax and all that.
Sweet. Who's up next?
Christian.
Oh, I wasn't even on mute. All right, well, there we go. Yeah, I'm one of those people that are finishing up on the intro to Flask. Kind of took it easy yesterday. I was, like I said earlier, I was working on building my portfolio. So yeah, I mean, as of now, too early to tell.
The intro stuff that is kind of fuzzy for you that you'd like to review, or is it just
Not at the moment. I took most of the weekend to review, much like Jason, to review SQL Alchemy stuff, because literally during the project is when I had,
yeah,
I you know, didn't have the time to catch up or even like look in depth about how to do that. So do a little bit of review over the weekend, and as of now, from the intro, there hasn't really been much issue. So
who's up
we'll
next?
see later on though.
Who's up next for you?
Also, sorry, I just realized I didn't have mute, and I'm sure everybody was hearing all the background noise. So
Who do you want to go next? Or let's just jump to Kate.
oh yeah, sorry. We'll go with Caitlin.
Hey, yeah, still working through the intro stuff here as well, just going through it slowly to make sure I don't miss anything there, but so far so good with all that.
Awesome.
I'll pass it to Clayton.
Yeah, I'm in the what's the section? What the heck, what's it called? It's retrieving data from APIs. I'm sort of in the beginning of that. That's sort of where I am. Everything seems to make sense so far. Honestly, it's just like the biggest hurdle is the fact that I learned SQL Alchemy during the project. So it's sort of not as solidified as it probably should be. So I'm still kind of slow with it, but yeah, that's sort of the main issue.
Okay, cool. I think you're the last one. Anyone else hasn't gone?
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
I think it might, based on what I heard, I think it might benefit a couple people. The SQL Alchemy with Alembic content from phase 3, would it be just more relevant to just move forward and like say, okay, well, I don't quite understand Alembic super well, but it seems like we're not using that at all in Flask. Like, I mean, we're using the concepts, but it looks like it almost reteaches you some of that stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's a great point. Yeah.
So I'm wondering how, like, how important, I guess, would it be to study the old content, or should we just kind of like get what we can from this, and then if we need more review, go back or something like that? Or
Cool. So I would say, so it's in this phase, and we actually saw it yesterday too. We used Alembic to do the auto generation of the migrations from the models, and then doing the migration itself and doing the seeding. That's all Alembic. We just did it through the Flask library, that DB library I think we did.
Right. So I guess if we understand like the column item structure and all of that, is that enough of a base to move into the new content?
I think all the labs in this section either review it or they step through it. So I think as long as you get the concepts of, Alembic is a thing that helps you manage your tables and data in SQL Alchemy. It will generate a migration from your model file, and a migration is telling the database from one state to another. And then you can have multiple migrations as you change your database. You can go forward or roll back on those. You can write seeds to populate your database initially, and that's all Alembic does pretty much. As long as you understand those words that I just said, more or less, the the syntax is mostly the same. It's just slightly different because it's going through Flask. But yeah, I would say if you did your project and understand what happened, I don't think you need to go back and redo it, because they'll be, especially the labs and stuff, will step you through
Right.
what you need to do. And again, that's
I meant mostly like syntax wise.
Yeah.
Like it looks pretty similar. I just wanted, it seems like it might just be a waste of time to try and like learn the syntax of Alembic, of doing it with Alembic now that we're doing it with Flask. So
yeah, I agree. As long as you get the concepts, you should be good.
gotcha. Perfect.
But if there's something that gets super fuzzy for you, just going back and like skimming it, not worrying about the syntax in the last phase, I think is going to be good for you. Yeah. Yeah, and the stuff that we did yesterday is pretty much the extent of what you need to know. So, Christian, do you have a question, or is that just a hand still up?
No, I just forgot to put it down and put it on now.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Thanks for giving me that update. It's so this is why I like that we get to do lectures now. It sounds like just barreling forward with the lecture that is next up is not going to be super useful for folks, because you're not to that point yet. So I think instead of just barreling through the whatever checklist that we're supposed to be doing, I think I'd like to open it up right now just for questions about anything that you are working on, questions that you had about stuff from yesterday, or anything at all. I think it might be more useful just to keep working on labs, and maybe we can do a double hitter tomorrow, like an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon, just to get all this stuff in. What do folks think about that? I'm ready to roll, but I don't want to just talk at you for an hour if it's not going to help. Cool. So yeah, open for questions about anything at all that you're working on, or anything you're seeing in the labs that's you want more clarification on. I can talk about any of it at length.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So we're using Postman, right? Will we always be using that, or is that only because we don't have a front end to interact with?
Yeah, great question. Yes. Yeah, I don't use Postman. I use a very similar app called Insomnia. I feel like the interface is a little bit cleaner, but it does exactly the same thing as Postman. When I'm developing, I'll use Postman all the time still, even if I do have a front end, because a lot of the times, a front end is complex in an actual application, right? If you want to test something, you like have to, log in. You have to navigate to the place that you're going to. You have to select a thing. You have to hit the button to put it in your shopping cart, or delete it from a list, or send a message to a user, or whatever. And so for each time you want to test that, it's usually a bunch of clicks and moving around. HTTP APIs and RESTful APIs are stateless, which means that aside from the session stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit, no matter, you can make a request at any time. The request solely depends on what data you're sending it and what data you're getting back. So in order to test an API, it is often very useful to just say, hey, I want to make a post to this endpoint with this data and see what happens. And so instead of using a browser and clicking through and going through thing and then opening up an inspector window and finding the right request and opening that up and looking at everything, Postman or Insomnia, or there's a bunch of tools that do the same thing, are really good for just exercising those APIs and seeing if those individual points working. Again, because we have that API in the middle, that separation. It doesn't matter if it's a web browser hitting it or not. It doesn't matter if it's a app on a phone hitting it. All it matters is that it's getting an HTTP request of a certain method with certain data to a certain URL, and that's all we need to know. And Postman or Insomnia is the easiest, simplest way to do that. So yeah, I use it constantly. I think it's a great tool for learning stuff as well when you don't have a front end built out. But even when I have a front end built out, I'll be hitting it every day with some tool like that. It's super useful. Has anyone not given Postman a shot yet? Or is anyone confused about what we're talking about? Cool. If you do, holler and we'll get you hooked up. And there's also a section in Canvas about it. So yeah, but yeah, super useful tool all around, no matter where you're at. Did that answer what you're asking?
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Awesome. What other questions we have?
I have a question about the stuff that I was talking about earlier about post and patch. Is that okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's disabled.
Oh, let me enable it.
Thank you.
Cool, should be good.
Okay. So I have the solution code from the lesson in my app.py. And this is the app.py. So I should be able to get imposed here, right? And if I go to Postman, and let me see if I have the, oh yeah, here. Here. Review. I'm able to get these information. But then if I try to post, hold on, post. Sorry, hold on. Post request. Here, like this. So I have to put in 4 or 5 and then comment. And then game ID 5, user ID, and then hit send. It just comes back with like null for comment ID, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, so there's a couple things we can start looking at there. Number one, I want to say that's a real weird way of building that method. I would write a separate function for each one of those methods.
Okay.
That's real weird that we would do that. I think it may be because it kind of reflects the way that Flask RESTful does it. It feels like whoever wrote this is writing decorator code, but they're actually writing Flask RESTful code only using decorators instead. So that feels weird to me. But regardless, it looks like it should work. That code looks okay. So where we want to start looking at it is, so let's talk about debugging this. The things that we do know are that you are getting. So that was a post, right? Not a patch I was looking at. So the great. So a couple things we can look at here. Let me draw on your screen. Here, we see that we're getting a 201 created response code back. So we know that it did create something, or we at least we're sending that back, whether it created it or not. But we didn't get an error. And of course, we can see that it is sending the right fields back, but all the fields are null. So what does that tell us about what's happening? Without looking at the server code, it tells us that it is at least aware of what fields we're looking at and is sending us something back. But it's probably not, it's either not creating something or it's not sending back the thing that it created. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code and see what that says.
Okay.
So let's see, we have my review with new review. Can you scroll down just a little bit? Awesome. So here are a few things that interesting. And that's from the building a post patch delete API. Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. Less. There's one thing I noticed when I like get from this API,
Mhm.
there's for example, like there's a game,
Mhm.
and I think it's pulled through this game ID. Does that matter? Because we are not sending.
Interesting. Can I take a look at how you're sending that post request again? Because I noticed something in your I'm sorry, in your Postman. You can go back to Postman.
Postman. Oh, Postman.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries. Yeah, because I noticed something in the URL when you did the post. I just want to see if it was what I thought it was or not.
Post.
Mhm.
Should I type in again?
Okay, I think I know what we're doing here. So go ahead and type, just give the comment a value just so we can see what that looks like. Cool. So Post has different ways of sending the data over.
Mhm.
We want to send it over as JSON, I believe, unless they're doing something different here.
Yeah.
So we can look at the URL and see that we have all of the parameters
Uh-huh.
broken out and they are put in the URL, which is generally what we don't want to see when we're doing a we we don't want to see when we're doing a JSON request. So basically, if we're doing a regular RESTful JSON request, we only want to see that part as a post, and we want to send the data in the body. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so what you're doing here is adding query params, and that's what these are called. These are query params. So anything after the URL with a question mark and then something equals something and something equals something, those are query params, which in theory should work, but let's try and do it the other way. So if we go to body and we want to call it JSON, scroll down a little bit there. Is there more stuff to scroll down in that list?
Maybe.
Um,
I
interesting.
think we can do raw and then select JSON.
Where?
Yeah, if you do raw, you
Uh,
should be able to.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there we go. JSON, you got it.
Oh, then
Yeah, and so now you put your JSON object in here.
so like this.
So instead of passing like key value, you'll pass that JSON object. That'll be
So
wrapped in curly braces. Yeah, and then comment blah score blah.
Oh, okay. The lesson wasn't doing this.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I was just like putting in
Oh yeah,
information.
it is. Why? Why would they do that?
No.
Huh?
Well, I guess I'll be
Really
you for this.
interesting thing that they're doing there.
This.
Wow. That
Right?
access to form data. That's
Right.
I don't like that. Interesting. That doesn't really talk about why it's doing that either, does it?
And then send.
Oh, okay, interesting. So reading this handling post requests section in that lab, um, it not knowing the motivation behind this part, it seems like they're talking about submitting something directly from a form via post, just like an HTML form, which we'll never do. We will never do. We're always going to be using React or something to make a fetch, doing a fetch
Mhm.
request to a post, sending the JSON in the body like this. And I think I know, knowing what I know about our curriculum developer, I when they were doing the curriculum, I kind of had to talk them out of saying how to render forms and stuff from Python, because I think that's the way they were used to doing it before. Because we don't do that here, and they hadn't looked at the JavaScript and React curriculum before writing this. So yeah, so this might be a holdover from like, this is how you get a post directly from a form instead of this is how you get a post request through an API. Interesting. I will make a note of that and have a conversation about that. Cool. So before we do all that, let's take the parameters off of the URL there.
Mhm.
And it'll still be slash reviews. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Let's see if that works. It might not, just because of the way that form thing is set up. Yep, still null. Okay, cool. That was one thing to look at. So,
Right.
wow, I'm really curious about that request.form get in there. I can tell you right now, I think outside of this exercise, you're never gonna have to do it that way.
How
Wow,
do you
yeah.
usually post?
So we usually post through JSON like this, and
Like this? Like
yeah,
typed out? This?
yeah,
Okay.
like the way we have here. We're gonna send JSON in the body.
Mhm.
And what we're gonna usually do is so when we get the request, we get the headers and the body. And what we would normally do is when we get a post or a patch, we're going to take that body, we're going to turn that JSON into an object, and then we're going to use that to create or update in the database. Yeah, yeah, I have questions about this lab. Yeah. Man, yeah. Yeah, so short version, I don't think you're ever actually gonna have to do it in that way. So yeah, I would say move past that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank,
Sorry about that. That's
oh, thank
helpful.
you.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Yeah, I'll look more into that and see what the deal is, and then make sure it's not like that going forward, because it shouldn't be like that. Cool. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really important. What other questions do we have with stuff you're working on? Cool. Sweet. Well, I'm not gonna talk anymore about stuff that is not helpful. So let's just go back to doing labs and stuff. Holler out in the channel if you run across anything that seems wonky like that, and I will do my best to straighten it out. Cool. Last call for questions before we close up shop. Awesome. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming to this little chat, and I'll see you all in a little bit.